stovetop has 240 grams of 140 calories and like 20 grams of protein, and it throws in ice conditioned stuff. So we'll get this potato salad. So what I ate last night. Oh, well, look at the froyo, okay? Greenlit. Okay, so you're looking at probably 600 to 800 calories, depending on the place. And 50 to 70 grams of sugar. Is Phil just planning his day in like 15-minute increments?
Probably 5. Yeah, he'll be here. But yeah.
Well, I asked not because I don't think he's going to come, but because like we've had 15-minute calls with him.
Uh-huh.
And it's like within 2 or 3 minutes he is on and off.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. It's like
You usually get a meeting request for like 11:25.
Well, he's calculating like being in the car at that point, and so then he's like going 90 miles per hour and talking to you and sending text messages to me. So it's quite the thing. Scares me a little bit, but he's gotten on this line so far, I guess. You know, they talk about the psychological effect of crossing out a task or like ripping out paper like you're talking about, how it's really helpful for you.
I totally agree.
Like it gives your body like satisfaction and a sense of achievement and encourages you to keep doing it.
And work in the rush.
Yeah. It's like one of those, trained response things. You train your body to keep doing it, you'll actually do better. There he is.
Was late $1 richer. Yeah. You too. I think we're sitting down there, so we have more plug space. I just haven't moved. Oh, you're fine. But just some setting and stuff down here.
How you guys been?
Awesome.
I met with Man-Made Innovations, and they all think you guys are awesome.
Man-Made Engineering?
Well, they have a new company.
Innovation?
Chad. Well, yeah, so Chad's starting an innovation.
That's cool.
Yeah. Huh. He's doing his own little TVC spin out. I mean, not like that, but he's
like
spinning out products.
Yeah,
well, he himself, though.
Uh-huh.
It's not an incubator. It's him saying, like, hey, we have an idea. Let's just go build it and start seeing if we can take it to market.
That's awesome.
Interesting. You're looking dapper.
Oh, thank you. It was part of the new dress code.
Part of a new dress code. They're coming down on you here.
Not here.
Taylor and I are team teaching a class
Oh, you are?
at Elliott Business College.
Oh, really?
Huh?
Good for you guys. That's cool.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Is it interesting good or interesting bad?
Good.
Is it?
Yeah.
That's cool. Good for you.
New experience.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet microphone. Will you grab it?
Dustin, what do you need help with? Do you want me to set up Facebook?
Yeah, if you could do that, I don't know.
So,
I don't know exactly.
this is the only time I use Facebook every month. I don't keep up or care about friends, I guess. There we are.
Doing it in different ways.
You know, I just, Facebook is so much.
Just testing, if everybody can hear us. Looks like audio is working. All right, everybody, just 1 second, we'll kick this off.
It says live, your connection is weak, but I'm checking.
I think we're in. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. We want to welcome everybody from the WebEx webinar, as well as everybody on Facebook who will be watching this event live. For any of you guys who are on the WebEx and would actually like to watch us as we sit here at the University of Utah and discuss, you can go to our Facebook page, go to Fluid, the Facebook page, and then you'll see the live link right there, and you can launch it right from that. Should have audio as well. We'll also be doing Q&A live on Facebook to continue all of this. So all in all, we'll be about 45 minutes here. And so without further ado, I want to just kick off our final part 4, or I guess part 4 in the startup series. And this is going to be the culmination of the series. This is our first customer to scale. And so we're going to be talking about getting your first customer and scaling that up to make it a viable business and turning it into something that you can hopefully live off of. And so before we dive too far into that, I just want to introduce ourselves. As usual, my name is Dustin Cederholm. I'm the Digital Marketing Director for Fluid. I'm here with Phil Case, Managing Director of Fluid. Phil, do you want to introduce yourself?
No, always good to be here. I'm passionate about technology and working with a lot of startups and software companies. It's fun to get it together again with PBC in their office. So
fantastic. And then Taylor Bench and Spencer Walker, do you guys want to introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, looking forward to the discussion today. I think wrapping up kind of this series should be a good time today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's been a long time coming.
And kind of just to talk a little bit about the housekeeping as to how you can follow along. We're on Twitter at the hashtag Fluid Webinar Series, or you can reach either of us directly at GetFluid and at TechComOff, as well as, again, on Facebook if you want to give us a direct message. So for those of you who are just joining this specific event, we have had 3 previous webinars, and we started with basically the Succeed with the Lean model, and so kind of talking about how do you come up with a model at all, and how do you keep it lean so that you can have a startup and take it to market. And then once you have a concept, how do you take that concept to product in part 2. And then part 3 was from product to first customer. And now we're here at part 4 with from first customer to scale. And so we'll just turn it over to Spencer. And if you guys want to just kick us off and tell us a little bit about what are we expected to learn in this specific webinar series.
So that's kind of been a question throughout the series, is what do we hope that people will come away from the webinar with. And so today it would be, where we left off last time was, like you said, you built the product, you have a company, you have some customers, and those are, I think last time we talked about crossing the chasm, those early customers are extremely valuable for many reasons. And at some point, if you want to really grow and to scale, you're going to need to move beyond those early adopters, and you need to get to more of a mass market customer base. And so today, I guess what we would want to come away with is what resources are out there. Fluid has some, TBC has a few to help people that are going from first customer to scale, and then resources in the community. We'll share a couple of case studies. We have one, and you guys have a couple, to just give. I think it's nice to have real life examples of people that have done this. It's hard to do this. This is probably a place where many companies just cease to be companies, and so I think it's exciting. It's a little bit scary, and we'll share some real world examples.
I kind of feel like the excitement was in the first three parts of the series. You know, you're always very excited about your product. You're going to be taking it to market. You're working with people who are also very excited with. And now this is kind of where the rubber meets the road. Is this going to happen? Am I going to be able to make this a business? And so this is probably one of the more important parts, although obviously strategy is always something you need to think through and understand the product and how you're going to develop it. But this is now that moment, and you're going to see if this is going to work or not. So.
And at this point, you're probably playing with other people's money.
Yeah, good point.
You know, up to this point, it's probably friends and family. It's probably your own. You mortgaged your house. But now, I mean, to scale, you're probably going to need some investment, some outside investment.
Absolutely.
And I would think this is when investors get most anxious and excited, because this is when they actually see this thing going somewhere and do we have traction, and are we on rails and moving.
And this is actually a great webinar, because I've heard investors who want to see this plan. You know, what is the scale plan? And so for you guys to understand this part of it, we'll even give you a leg up as you go into pitches and just kind of help you understand what are investors looking for if you haven't already secured them or will be looking to secure more funds. So got that, we'll kick it off.
So we thought it'd be cool to just take a look at the history of spin-outs from the university over the last couple of decades. And you'll see there around about 10 years ago is when it became more of a focus, I think, to do these spin-outs. And what this graph is showing is where those startups are coming from, what part of campus. This is from our 2015 annual report. It's available on our website. Our 2016 annual report will come out very soon, and we're excited to see what happened last year.
Yeah, it should be coming out next week. Just to add on, in this graph, you can see a definite paradigm shift of our office around that 2005 time period. And that came for different reasons. A lot of it was an administration change here at the university that then put a direction on campus to focus on commercialization as well as focus on startup companies. One of the outcomes of that and one of the benefits of that is now our office, the revenue that's generated from our office is about 85% coming from startup companies. So that's another reason for us to focus on this, is the market just in general in multiple industries has shifted such that startup companies are more important, I guess, to universities, because the larger companies, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, are not taking on as much early stage risk as they used to. So there are very few large company deals with universities where it's an early stage technology and we would license to a Fortune 100 company. So that's where a lot of our focus is headed. That's why a lot of our focus is headed now towards the startups.
Very interesting.
If you go to our website and look at that annual report, you can also see a breakdown of what those companies were, the names of those companies, and it's kind of, I think it's neat to see which of them are still active, which ones were acquired, which ones are not active anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. So throughout the series, we've kind of talked about, it may have appeared that creating a startup is this linear process where you just go through the motions, step 1, step 2, step 3, and you'll just have this kind of if-then statement. If I do this, then this will just work out. And in a lot of cases, that's true. I mean, there are steps that you need to go through. I mean, there are things that need to get done, boxes that need to get checked to move from an idea to a product to customers. And that's kind of what we show through this flow here. And we'll focus today on those last 3, really. I mean, it's management, funding, and scaling. But what we find, if you go to the next slide, is, and we created this graphic, it's those elements are there, but knowing when and where to go to which one is a maze.
Yeah.
It really is a maze.
You may end up going back to the same place several times as well. We find that it's not as linear as the previous slide. It's more iterative and cyclical, repetitive. I mean, you may be bouncing between problem and solution multiple times before you get to the point where we're going to talk about today, the funding, scaling, et cetera.
And in many cases, you might just hit a roadblock or something that is just, I mean, it stops you in your tracks.
I just have to say how many times that word has come up across the series, iterative. You know, everybody thinks that they're going to rush into this and they have the perfect idea the first time, but how many companies have we looked at that have changed their model completely and become solvent in doing so, but when it first began, maybe it wasn't. And so I even think the link that you were mentioning where you can actually go see the companies and how they've done, you know, we learn from our history and so many times we don't actually pay attention to it. And so that's a huge resource, at least from what I'm thinking. If I would be going and seeing common companies and maybe learning about some of the iterations they had to go through or how they went through this and where they ultimately ended up. And so I think looking back is always a great idea, and iterating, again, the way to get to the right answer.
We have an analyst right now employed at TBC who's doing some outreach to startups from the university, and he's been interviewing them and asking them these basic questions. You know, what's working well? What are some of the roadblocks that you're running into? And just today, you know, he stopped in and asked me. He said, you know, they've identified a problem. They need to network more with software developers. They need help with that. And so that, you know, is an opportunity for us to kind of not re-engage, but to be involved again. You know, they've moved on from the university, but there's opportunities for us to be involved.
Yeah, that's neat. One thing I would throw out to the listeners right now, I would love to hear if you have questions that you would like to have asked to startup companies. I mean, we at the university have a portfolio of 150 or so companies that have started over the last 10 years. And I'd love to add to our question bank of the questions that we ask our startups to learn more about this. So if you have some specific questions that you think would be interesting, I'd love to potentially be doing another webinar about our findings and answering some of these questions.
Okay. You know, we will have a resource section at the end of this as well. We could probably share some type of a link or something where they could go and put in their own questions, and we could collect them that way and then get responses. So look for that as we do that webinar and send the link back out to all of those of you out there.
So, you know, when you get to the point of scale, there's a couple of ways to exit your company, and sometimes you don't ever exit your company. It's a cash cow, and why exit that? But acquisitions are a popular way for someone to exit their company, and we've had a couple in the last year or so, and we thought that it'd be interesting today for our case study to look at a company that came out of the university, got to scale, and was acquired. It's called Avancei Bio.
And just to give some landscape around that acquisition model. So all of those startups that you saw on the graph at the beginning, what we're finding is it's typically taking about 5 to 7 years for one of these startup companies to get to the point where they are primed and ready to be acquired. There's a lot of work to get to that point to create a valuable asset in the company such that others would say, you know what, that's at a point where we would like to purchase that. So it's a fairly long road, especially if it's kind of outside of that software realm. The software realm is a little bit different in that it can happen a little bit more quickly, but most of the companies we're seeing exits have been around for 5 to 7 years.
That's great information. And not to put you guys on the spot, but just a question, of all the people you do see coming in, is it normally that they plan to have an exit strategy, or do they normally come in thinking this is going to be the business they build and hand off to their children? What is the breakdown? Is it 50-50, 90-10? Do you guys have any idea? Maybe I'm putting you on the spot too much there.
Probably it varies. We interact with repeat inventors.
Okay.
So this is not the first time that they've worked with us. We work with people who have never heard of, they've never heard of TBC even to begin with. So that's, I think, a fun part of our job is educating on so what we've talked about just in this series, the lean model, and for many of them, it's that first part of idea to concept and concept to product.
I would say that most of the companies that we start or spin out of the university are probably more on the acquisition or buyout or kind of that path, rather than the lifestyle business of I'm going to pass this on to my kids. I would say that's just because of the type of technologies that come out of the university. Dustin, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, that there are stages of companies we've gone through in these webinars. It's kind of the early stage of customer validation, et cetera. Now we're getting up to the scale and the larger growth side of these businesses. What we find is that the life cycle of a company, as it changes, in terms of how large it is, where it is in the market, management teams have to change as well. It's very rare that an ideator or the person who founds a company can take it from $0 in revenue to $5 million, and then also transition it from $5 million to $50 million, and be the same person that can take a company from $50 million to $500 million. Oftentimes there are management changes that need to happen because of, one, someone may just not be interested in the scaling going from 50 to 500 million. And so most of the technologies that come out of the university are significant enough that they could get to that point. And so it's not too common to see a company just say, you know what, our goal is to hit $5 million in revenue, and then just keep at $5 million for the next 20 years.
It's interesting, I was at a conversation with a key equity player in town just a few days ago, and he candidly to me said, okay, you're working with this company too, is that the right guy? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I'm not convinced he's going to be the one to grow it. And we kind of went through the key management team, and he just wanted my advice because, you know, as a major owner of the company, they want to make sure that, you know, they have the right team on board, and that changes over time. So,
and we see that a lot at the university, where an inventor initially could be considered the CEO when they're in their lab. When it comes time to change the company from being a research and development type endeavor to saying, okay, we're ready to commercialize, most of the time the inventor or the professor here on campus is not that person to say, I'm going to take my skill set that I've built over 20, 30 years in the chemistry lab, and I'm going to go out and be a CEO of a company.
yeah.
That's a very difficult transition to make. So we're constantly finding the right guy, or the
Operators.
right person, the right lady to do the job. And so it's this case study, I think, that we'll go over will show that a little bit.
And just kind of wrap that up kind of nicely, I really think that's one of the major fears that is so nice about TBC, because they are inventors, they're not business people, and so many people don't do the business because they know that's not their skill set. And so to have a resource like yourselves is really fantastic, that you can help manage how to build a team and kind of guide some of those things just from what you've seen in the past, if nothing else, you know. And so I think for those maybe listening who will hear this webinar, if you do have that fear, there's many ways around it, and if you have a great idea, you should still try to get it from product to conception. So we'll jump into the case study.
Yeah. So
The grand reveal.
yeah, there's not a censor box there. There's nothing. There's nothing suspect behind the black box.
Appropriate context.
Just wanted to
The general audience.
keep people waiting. So you've got a team here on the left, an amazing lady and a couple of gentlemen there that have been here at the U developing some technology, and then, as was the case here, the gentleman on the right there, Rob Perry, he came in, he's more of the business person. He does have a very technical background as well, but he has built a great career being more of the commercialization person rather than the person in the lab. So he's partnered with these amazing people in the lab to build both a piece of software and a piece of hardware. So they were able to make that transition and bring on a new team member when they needed it. They were able to recognize, hey, we need somebody who can take this to market. So what is it that they took to market? We can move on to the next slide. Basically, you'll see a computer. Well, you'll kind of see the top of a computer, depending on how your screen is working, and a microscope. And that microscope, it looks pretty fancy in this picture. It even gets fancier maybe in the subsequent slides, but initially it looked more like a duct tape and baling twine microscope. So this is a fairly refined piece of hardware here, coupled with that software on the computer, and Avansci Bio kicked off as kind of an imaging company. So there's a lot of imaging elements to their business model.
Go to the next one. So as Taylor mentioned, you can see this iteration. You can see where they've gone through the stages to interact with customers and find out what features would be desirable. And this is kind of the refined product, hardware coupled with the software.
Okay.
So that microscope on the left is the next iteration. I mean, I watched.
So the red was the iteration prior, and this is final version. Okay.
Yeah. And there were multiple iterations before that. But basically what's going on is that microscope is able to, their movable parts, both the base and the kind of the body of it going up, it will move around and image what he's seen on the computer. And not only that, it will allow the scientists to get different information than just the picture. It runs a lot of algorithms to be able to kind of trace margins, etc., and show different elements of what the microscope typically sees, but now it's enhanced with the software. So this particular technology went through multiple iterations of software. We brought it into the TVC, into the Software Development Center, had some of the amazing developers that we have, PhD level developers, flex their brain on it and help Rob and the team really make sure that they were hitting what the customers wanted and saying, okay, yes, this is the value. I mean, if we can show this type of imagery to the people using the microscope, there's a huge value there. So they went through the first 3 stages that we went into the webinars to get to this point.
That's actually really cool.
So here's another shot of kind of the process that they go through in processing images. And as was mentioned previously, if acquisition is the end goal, oftentimes the acquirer, they're not saying you need to get to this crazy level of sales. It's just prove it to a certain point. They have all of the channels already built out. They just need to know, does it fit into our channels? Have you demonstrated that you can sell it? They're comfortable taking it from that point forward. They just want to see that it's proven.
So an example of that is Avansci. They took that red microscope, the kind of prototype. I mean, they were building them one-off, and they started selling those. I mean, they were milling the aluminum themselves. They were figuring it all out, putting it all together, and they started selling those units coupled with the software. And that's what Spencer's talking about. They showed that traction with an initial few customers. And granted, it's a fairly expensive system, so they were generating some decent revenue on that kind of one-off basis, but a lot of work to get to that point. Going to conferences, showing things off, and then Avansci, as it grew, they started talking about that strategic partner. And so that's what we're waiting for now, is who is that partner? Basically, they were acquired and brought into a larger company. And
much larger.
Yeah, much larger company, and now they are currently a division within that company. And so that's one of those stories where they took it over several years of development, prototyping, customer validation, to the point where they were then able to say, okay, we can now scale it. One point that I wanted to make on this slide is there was an interesting book that I read quite a few years ago called Blueprint to a Billion. And it talks about billion-dollar companies that have grown to be that large and what it took for them to do that. One of the points that it draws out is these companies needed a quote-unquote big brother in the market to be able to kind of shield them, to be able to work with them or partner with them at some point in their life cycle to say, okay, we're almost as if you're, I'm not a cycler, but cutting the wind or drafting off of someone. Also kind of in the racing industry, you want to be able to ride right behind that leader so that you're not having to cut through the wind. And that's a similar situation here where Bonsai was working within an industry and knew exactly how to take advantage of that.
When do you know, from the time that Rob came in, how long to acquisition?
I would probably say 3 to 4 years, probably closer to 4, if I'm remembering right. But it was somewhere in there. It wasn't like he comes in and 6 months later. I mean, he did a lot of, that team did a lot of work together.
And that was one question I was going to ask is what is the usual time from a company to say, from ideation to first customer, proof of concept, but then when do they usually really start to scale or look for an acquisition or kind of that greener pasture? Because I think sometimes if I have a great idea and 6 months later I'm selling it, that's never how it goes. It's often years and years. And I'm curious what you see kind of an average, for those companies that do succeed, that when they do hit out of the park, those teams, it sounds like have been through years of diligence.
Yeah, so on the university side, up until the last few years, the average for one of our startups to start generating revenue was somewhere between 7 and 9 years.
Wow.
From the time that they told us they had this and disclosed it to our office to generating their first dollar of revenue.
Wow.
I think that's a bit atypical. I mean, that's university work where grant cycles come into play, et cetera. But what we're trying to do with some of these processes that we run in our office is compress that time so that we're adding value, adding resources to the inventors to help them so that they can focus on what they're good at and other people can come in and help them on maybe more of the business side or the product development side, et cetera. So we're compressing that time, hoping we're seeing it come down to closer to 5 to 6 year time frame.
Okay. Wow.
Okay. Yeah, and if you're, we talked about the different skill set, the person that takes it from 0 to 5 million. Wherever, if you're listening and if you have that skill set, we would love to talk. We have a lot of opportunity to engage at multiple levels. So, open invitation.
It's a great invitation. Just to transition quickly, we want to talk a little bit about some of those skill sets and maybe what it looks like from an organizational standpoint from, Fluid's perspective, which obviously is the marketing side of things, but we feel that we focus well in the bridging of sales to marketing and even really just kind of building a business around great business values and sales best practices as well as marketing best practices. And so Bill and I will just jump in quickly and talk a little bit about how to take that first customer to scale.
It's interesting. Every time we sit down, and this is boring stuff, but with the company, we typically talk about Fluid being interested in people, process, and systems. And it's particularly sales and marketing. If you haven't figured out how to do that, you're never going to be able to scale and grow revenue. And even tomorrow I'm meeting with a startup, I won't say who, but even talking with them, as we started to go through some of the fundamentals, what they wanted was the shiny new toy. By the time we finished with them, it was, I guess we have work to do. We're not going to get anywhere from scaling if we don't hit these fundamental processes. And so as we looked at the technology investment they needed to make and even communication between teams and what needs to happen on sales, we're not, so to speak, sales consultants, but because it's so directly connected with what we do in marketing, we want to make sure, there's another client we had as an example, we were able to dramatically increase the number of requests and even upwards of $250,000 in net new type of business coming through monthly, only to find out the sales team wasn't following up. They weren't doing it. These are people that are saying, we want to buy this product, give us an invoice, let's go. And sales team was just slow, and there were some broken processes there, and the systems were letting people fall out. So that is key. That's one of the first things, even a conversation I had yesterday with the CEO of a startup, rapidly growing technology company. He's talking about going to more enterprise-type customers, and his comment to me was, I'm not sure if we're ready for you yet. And probing further, he said, right now I'm struggling to get people on our customer fulfillment service side, but especially enterprise salespeople. We know how to talk to SMB, we don't know how to talk to enterprise. So he said, yes, we'd like to scale, but until I get the right people in place and then, make sure our systems and processes are correct for enterprise, this is a kind of a moot conversation. So it's interesting to get that feedback from some of the executives of these technology startup companies. So I think that's number one, is in order to grow and scale revenue, you've got to make sure that you've addressed each of those key / some seemingly boring points, but they're really essential for growth.
I think they're so essential, and for me, I guess I'm an addict of Shark Tank, for those of you who watch Shark Tank, but so many times you actually watch them say, like, this is a great product, but I don't like you. And when the person's like, well, I want to be involved, you can see that they're not allowed to, or not able to disconnect themselves from what they have and actually make the deal. And even on the flip side, oftentimes they say, you're a great salesman, you're a great person, I want you, but I don't really even want the product. And so I think these three things really show at that startup phase how important they are. And you're listening to experts, as Bill was just mentioning, really being able to analyze this correctly at this time, because it really is going to be that thing that, back to the rubber meets the road, it's now to have these things done correctly, or else when you move forward, it's not going to go real well.
Yeah. So question on that, you talked about the right people, and you gave an example also of talking with an investor that said, I don't know if this is the right person leading the company. Have you had an experience of watching that change? So a CEO understanding they're not the right person and saying, you know what, I'm going to step aside and let someone else take over. And how did that go?
When the CEO is self-conscious and recognizes it, it goes really well. When it's the investor tapping them and suggesting you need to step down, it's not that it doesn't go well, but it's a little bit more tricky how you still have that, institutional knowledge, potentially keep them on board. They can still be kind of the core or passion of the company while letting somebody kind of take the driver's seat. So your question, there's a company we work with regularly that is in this technology software space, and this individual has been leading the company for 5 years now, and he was just a few months ago in one of our management meetings. He told me and his management team, I realize I'm not the CEO, even though I am, and I'm not going to be the one to make this grow. What I want to go do is just go sell the product. That isn't build the company. So he went out, found a successor, hired him on, gave him some equity, and this individual is now the CEO. He's the president, and he's happy as a clam, because he can do what he's good at and focus on, and what he considers the financials and all the rest of that, he doesn't have to focus on it day in and day out. So, but it is a tough one.
What do you think it was that triggered that CEO to understand that they weren't the right person?
I think his team had mentioned some things to him. I don't think it was as directly, but some concerns just about growth. So I think his management team was aware. I think he just, after years of seeing his company just kind of succeed, but kind of up and down. I think he just had enough self-recognition to look inwardly. So, but I think it's a little bit more of a rare breed. So
I think so. Some ego in there. So just looking at the first customer, we wanted to talk a little about how you got that first customer to begin with. And so some of the things that I really think about, me being from the marketing side of things, is just what is that experience, and whether that's an on-site product, are they coming to buy? And it doesn't necessarily, that doesn't mean e-commerce per se, but just are they coming to your website to learn about you, to get that trust factor, especially when you're so new. And so what is that experience like? And even if you are a startup, I think you can do that experience very well in being forthcoming at what stage you're at in this entire process. I think if you try to have a website that is more than what you are already, there might be a little bit of disconnect in that communication, and vice versa. If it's just not up to par, you might not get the trust that people will move forward to either make a purchase or even make that phone call to get more information. Second off is just customer service. In your example, it was the CEO actually going off to sell the product and kind of knowledgeable about that, probably passionate about that, and having that right group being able to deliver that. But on the back end, who are the people doing the day-to-day? And so if he doesn't want to do the numbers or the shipping or any of that stuff, who are the people doing that, and how can you make that a really great experience? I think of Kickstarters all the time when I think about this stuff. With the Kickstarter model, you actually give somebody your money, and there's no promise of any product for, 3, 6, 9, even a year down the road, so you're just kind of giving away money and hoping down the road. But the thing that they really say about the successful Kickstarters is how well they communicate during that period where you're not getting your product. They're sending out updates about, what is the latest iteration, what did we try here, did we get investment money, and so they're keeping people in the loop even though they're still not getting the product. And I think that's part of the customer service that really is in that first customer and is built in from the very beginning as we think of scaling.
I think that goes to something that you both said in a previous webinar. It's the Simon Sinek Start With Why, where he says people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So it's not necessarily as important what you're getting in a Kickstarter campaign. It's why did you back them, and it's because you wanted to be engaged with them. So that was something interesting that you drew out of in some of the earlier webinars.
Sure, absolutely. I think that's, we talked about that being your business. What is the passion of the business, not what is the product, and that's what will help you succeed. And that's kind of similar to the product and the service experience. Is the product really what it is? And, Avante, it's this incredible product, and they're delivering it to these doctors who are really going to be able to make a difference with that. But are they able to see it and experience? Are they able to hold the pen? And how did they do that? And maybe you guys could speak more to that, or maybe it was limited, but just are they thinking about what that product experience is going to be? And I almost could say they obviously were, because they went from the red model to the more refined, a little bit nicer piece. That's something I could see in the office where the red one was like, okay, you can tell at what point you're in. Second is you go from first customer and you start to scale, cross-selling, upselling, and even partnerships. If you are having investors, what are they bringing to the table that you can start to utilize? And then is it just one product, or do you have a scale plan where we're going to sell this product, but here are the accessories, and here's the software subscription. What is it that you can do to cross-sell or upsell with the current product that you have? And maybe that's down the road, but are you kind of thinking about that type of stuff? Center of influence, again, investors, your own network, things of that nature. Who can really help you get this thing off the ground? Bringing it back to the Kickstarter campaign example, there's a lot of people who will say that about 20% of the funds you're trying to raise should actually be raised by your network. A lot of people think that's friends, family, and sure, some of it is, but it's more just the network. You're the people who've gone out, you've sourced all these different products, you've met people in your space, and now can you convince those people to buy before you ask a true complete stranger? And so I think centers of influence are something you should be thinking about as you get that first customer, and how can they help you go on to scale things. Lastly is review. I think that we should be doing a user-generated review of your processes, and this comes back to the iterative concept that we have. Are you iterating your product? Are you iterating your business? And then second, are you actually getting user-generated content? So if you got the product out, and you mentioned this, that they actually had individuals on site, actually had individuals use the product and give them feedback before really taking it to market, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, I think those are things people really miss. And, I guess I'm either watching too much television or something, but on the concept of Silicon Valley, they build this really cool product, and they're all tech geeks, and they take it to market, and they ultimately really realize that nobody understands what's going on. And so they really missed that step that Avante actually did. And so I think that's something people should be thinking about. And then just nurturing throughout the campaign. I can equate it back to the Kickstarter, but are you nurturing them through the process, keeping in touch with them to a correct cadence? So I think those are really important first customer considerations. I don't know if Phil, you have anything to add to that.
No, as you begin, I think those first customers, as we've talked about before, you kind of treat them as gold. I think there's a depth of qualitative reviews and experience and feedback you can get from them. And then as you begin to refine the product and feel that you're at a point of scale, that's when you'll proceed for a little bit more rapidly. I do, just due to limited time, I do want to spend a few minutes on these next few points. So this kind of shows the purpose of marketing automation. We've probably mentioned it in the past, but it's probably the next big thing that will continue to take the marketing world by storm. Of the CRM space, it's probably the fastest growing. It represents billions and billions of dollars in terms of an industry now. And it's one that every company should be saying, you know, at some point, as we begin to grow our customer base, this needs to be brought on board, becomes a key part of our process, people, and systems. And really, it's the brainchild of everything that happens in marketing, connecting your CRM to actually do something, personalizing your outreach, and really being able to nurture leads and be able to bring them back into, you know, to the point of a sales qualified lead, better qualify them, and help them to see the value of what you're offering. So there's some steps noted here in terms of, you know, automation helping identify traffic, beginning to segment, beginning to score leads. It can often accelerate the sales process and then ultimately help you measure where there are gaps in sales and marketing and reduce those, as well as understand where there's potential budget waste. So this is probably a webinar in and of itself. In fact, we do have a webinar recorded on this on our resources page, which we'll send you to as well. But you know, you should be asking yourself, if you haven't heard of automation, go look it up. And if you'd like to learn more on that, we can send you additional resources to be of help there. This next piece, you know, which we'll call outreach enablement or account-based marketing, depends on the type of business you're after. A lot of the software tech companies will, you know, have some target accounts as they grow. And it's less about let's just drive inbound lead traffic to whoever wants to buy it, to there's some strategic accounts we can acquire that might potentially be, you know, $500,000 in revenue to us over the next 2 to 3 years. And those strategic accounts, as you identify them, and the companies or agencies like ourselves can help you do that, this outreach enablement notion of how does marketing support sales with those strategic accounts they want to capture. And there's a cadence and there's an effort to that. And you know, I would familiarize yourself with account-based marketing. It's really the new focus in B2B right now. And you know, you're not going one-to-many and focusing on lead quantity. It's focused on lead quality and much bigger fish to fry. So that's an area that we continue to spend a lot of time in. Most of our conversations with the every tech company we engage with, it usually has first set of customers and they're coming to us to scale. And usually that's one of the first things we'll talk about, is this notion of outreach enablement or account-based marketing, helping them sell up, you know, in terms of the type of clientele and size they want to go after. So I think that's a key piece.
So just kind of coming into remembering your funnel, this is something that we walk into companies, whether they're startups or you know, mid-size, and often they may not know what their funnel is. They have loosely based criteria that they're kind of passing around. Their sales guys call it something, their marketing group calls it something else. But at this stage, I really think it's important to remember the funnel. The couple of things that aren't on here, just kind of how this is broken out, and that's into the awareness, consideration, engagement, and then nurture stages. And so what you really want to do is you've got to recognize those in the fact that awareness is where people are still learning about you. And so many times people come to us and say, okay, I want 100 leads every month, something to that effect. And
we actually get that quite a bit. The last one was 1,200 leads a month.
Yeah. And then I ask them, if I went into the street, how many people are aware this product exists? And they say, well, not really. And so you look at the economy of that, it's not really going to work. And so we have to really understand the funnel is first we got to make people aware of our product, and then we got to get into a sales you know, mindset. And that's what people don't think about with the funnel, in my opinion, enough. Even after awareness comes consideration, and still in that stage is a relationship aspect of it. So many times you walk in the door and you get the car salesman who just slams it down your throat, and you're just sitting there like, I'm still just kind of interested, and they lose trust, and that effect make them kind of just lose interest in it, something they could have been very passionate about. So in the consideration phase, you need to be a little bit sales-oriented, but almost just as much relation-based. And then as you get into engagement, that's where you're maybe talking contracts and you realize you're a right fit and you want to move forward with it. And then obviously the last is closing the deal and delivering that customer service that we talked about. So I think there's a lot in this slide. We won't go over it all, but those are some of the big things. And with startups, it's all about awareness. So find a way to get yourself in the market before praying for a bunch of sales.
This next notion is similar to how you'd refine software. You got to refine your marketing approach. And so ABT is the acronym for always be testing. You'll find the best marketers are always testing, day in and day out, and they're learning constantly. Even the biggest companies in the world do this constantly. And this is really where you can go from spending $100,000 on marketing and getting, a 2-time return value to a 5-time return value. If you want to get more bang for your buck in marketing, always be testing. Always be seeking to know how to improve conversion.
And if you are talking to people who say this is the right way, in my opinion, that's a red flag. I think at Fluid we will always suggest our best practices, but then you'll often hear us say, we don't know the answer. People want us to tell them, what's the best subject line? I have no idea. I'll tell you, everybody out there right now, I don't know. But I'm willing to A/B test to find what the better subject line is, and that's really what we want to get to. But nobody knows these questions unless they're testing.
One software company that does an excellent job at this, that is beginning to scale, and we're working with them, is VidAngel. You ever watched the VidAngel video? Now, with that, not only do they A/B test their own videos and emails, but the Harmon brothers, their adjacent agency that's created, Purple in terms of that marketing brand, in terms of the Squatty Potty, in terms of, some of the others, the poopery they brought to market. What you don't understand is they don't just create a video, launch it, and they were wildly successful, millions of views. There was probably upwards of 70 or 80 different iterations of the video. I mean, they're putting out multiple videos all of the time, and it takes them months to get it right. And they're so scientific. It's the art, but then the science comes to it, and they're testing up the wazoo, and they finally get it right, and then it starts to scale and grow. But that just comes with taking a lot of time and being thoughtful, and I think that's one of the reasons they'll succeed.
Do you know how do you know where to start testing? So do you have kind of your general, hey, you usually start testing around this type of feature or the benefits or some aspect of the product? Like, how do you know where to even start your first test? Do you test?
That's a great question, and there's actually tools for that, to be honest. So first off, there is some general and grade expertise. I mean, as myself, I study conversion rate optimization, and so just in that study of the process, understand kind of where to begin to look. The second is analytics, and I think for startups, the word we should be mentioning, if there's a marketing tool you need, it's analytics. And if you don't have it on your site, or just if you don't have analytics even in your traditional stuff, you got to have somebody looking at the data, right? And so digitally, Google Analytics will show you what are the pages people are most often going to. And so right there, I'm going to focus my energy on where are people most. And so let's try to get the biggest bang for our buck. There's obviously things that are in the top, mid, and low portions of the funnel, and if I really need to sell, I'm going to focus that in the low part of the funnel. So understanding some of those things are important. But even beyond that, some of the images we have, the one on the right is actually heat mapping software, and what that does is your mouse becomes kind of like a magnifying glass, and it burns the screen depending on where it's sitting. The one on the left is actually eye tracking. That's very much more sophisticated and much more expensive, but it'll actually watch people's eyes. And so you'll put these programs on, and then you'll collect that data, and then you'll use those programs to actually come up with the test ideas, and then you come up with a hypothesis from that. So again, letting data make decisions for you rather than me coming in saying, well, I've studied this, this is the answer. I'm going to put something on your site, and it's going to tell me where to look.
Big Brother's always watching.
Yes.
I love this screen and this notion we developed a few years ago that your maturity as a company in marketing will grow over time. You'll go from no marketing expertise, no marketing personnel, no process, because you're just building a product, right? You've got to nail that first, to having a full-on team, to Domo that has 70-plus people in the marketing team. And it's interesting for us. We like to work with organizations that are somewhere in that kind of foundational to enhance phase where they might have their first website, they might have their first logo, some of their first messaging. They're saying, we got work to do, and here's some priorities, and we'll typically find in this maturation scale that this might take us 2 to 3 years to work with the company on. And we're fine to be patient. We'd rather do 2 things really well at a given moment and begin to operationalize it to move to the next, And so let's do a few things well, and you might be a year out from being able to implement automation. That's fine. Let's do those things that will generate the most value for the organization, and maybe that will turn into revenue. But we have found there's a natural correlation between, as we get more sophisticated with our marketing, really dial in the channels that are working and understand where we're getting attributable conversions from and real revenue opportunities for the sales team, to that actually having a higher return on investment. So the companies that are the most mature in marketing should be able to attribute and know exactly that I invest $1 and I get 6 back. And that's where we ultimately try to get to.
We're going to actually talk about that right now. Return on ad spend is another thing that a startup really needs to be highly aware of. And return on ad spend is a really neat concept in the fact that so many times we go to companies and they give us a marketing budget. And if you really think about that, that's a really poor way to spend your money, right? I mean, if you're spending $1 and getting $10 back, but you're only willing to spend $10, you're going to make $100. Why wouldn't you just keep spending that money and just make it until at some point you will see a diminishing return, and that 10 will actually start going back to 9, but you will have scaled up to maybe $10,000 in spend because you were getting it back. And so in a way, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot by setting a budget number. And so a better way to look at it is, what is my return on ad spend and where do I need it to be? So if I have all my overhead costs, I have my building, I have everything else, with a startup that can be pretty lean. And we talked about making it lean. But as you get into this, you know that in order for me to pay my bills and actually have revenue, I need my marketing to make me $10. And that's the number you really want to be gauging above and below. In the beginning as a startup, are you going to be right there? You're probably not. You're going to have to work to it. Things are going to have to be changed and refined and optimized. But that's really what you need to look at. And so without spending too much time on this slide, I really encourage everybody who is in a startup role to think, is the money I'm spending bringing me money back? And am I inadvertently shutting down that revenue stream just because I think that there's supposed to be budgets and things of that nature? So I always argue for a perpetual budget based on performance. Second of all, just so knowing this is startup and this is your first sell, how do you get that first sell? If we're talking about first sell to scale, in between the first sell and being scaled, you need to make some money, and you probably don't have a ton of money to begin with. And so we're showing you a slide here of some ways that you can actually do performance-based marketing, and some of these programs are based off of other people driving traffic to your site or sending you a referral. Obviously, they get something for that, but they also don't get paid unless they perform. And so it's a great way for a startup to try to get some performance without having to drop a lot of money before they get any results. And so below are just 4 examples of those: affiliate marketing, programmatic advertising, influencers, and referral programs, all examples of performance-based marketing that would be great for a startup.
I love this, and I love it when companies do it. And you can, now that we've gone through this series and I've learned a little bit about how Fluid works, and especially your engagement with VidAngel. VidAngel, I love VidAngel. And recently they sent me, how do you like us? Will you rate us? And I've gone on and done that. There's got to be some tracking there, because then recently I get one that says, hey, share this referral code and we'll give you $5 credits. And I'm guessing that those only went to people that rated them highly.
Right.
And it's neat to kind of see how this plays out and to watch the company grow. And I'm happy to refer a company that I like. And so why wouldn't you tap into your happy customers and let them sell for you? I mean, the sales force that's built in through your customers.
Exactly, and that's where the world's going. I mean,
awesome.
Google is putting so much emphasis on user-generated content, UGC. It's basically taking over your organic search. It's affecting the cost of your paid search. It's going into your social. I mean, right now, Google, knowing is the mission of Google is to make your search results as relevant as they possibly can. I mean, in a nutshell, that's what they're doing. And they've been gamed by the fact that they had to do it digitally in the past, but now they're actually getting real human feedback and saying, this is exactly what I want. And so they trust that way over somebody keyword stuffing a page and saying this is what it's about. So the world is actually going in that direction quickly, and so businesses should continue to pick up on it. Quickly, we'll jump into a case study of our own, and we kind of just had a few to share, probably bounce around a little bit here. Here's just kind of an example of some of those that we wanted to talk about. I don't know, Phil, if you want to lead us out.
Yeah, I might just highlight, for instance, we had brought up an example earlier. Mighty Light's one that we, even just with conversion testing, we took an existing site, we began to test and see how people responded. And theirs is a B2B model, so quote requests came in. But through about 2.5 months of improvements made, working closely with them and their sales team and understanding, how user behavior flows through the site. I mean, we even had recorded videos of people, getting frustrated with some of their current lead forms, and we made improvements and simplifications there, and optimize it for mobile. They were one that saw over a period of time, about $250,000 of net new increase. I mean, we were able to see conversions double, for them, and that it was a huge lift without even spending more money on let's drive more people to the site. Well, how about we get the same people converted to higher rates? There's a couple of others if you want to just proceed forward. Pluralsight was one, I won't go into too much detail here, but they approached us as they began to look at how do we go from the individual that we're after to more of an enterprise business, and so they gave us a list of their top 300 companies in the world that they wanted to get in front of, and with a list of suggested titles that would be important to them, and then we mapped the data, we mapped the contact information, and worked with them in preparing a campaign where they were able to really, in a very smart and efficient way, build awareness, build consideration over the period of several weeks among this very specific audience to ultimately leading that with their sales team to conversion, to engagement. And, and there were some really fun and creative things that they allowed us to do, in terms of even some fun direct response pieces. So as digital as they are, we wanted to send real in-person tangible mailers, that were valued at $70 a piece with what we included, and more of a three-dimensional type piece. And that, that's what we found effective with executives and managers that are busy. And then just one other I'll mention for time's sake is Ed Kenley Ford. This is one that we were able to work with them on a ground level, help redefine their messaging, their branding. We did a lot of research behind it and really came to market, back to market with them. And this campaign not only has been award-winning, but over about a 1.5 to 2 year period from engagement, their sales were up 19%. And in 2015, when they, when everybody else was for the most part down, they were up, and they moved from the 14th to the 7th, top-rated Ford dealer in the area. And so that was fun to see that, and that was not only an execution of their digital, but even getting the story right, getting their message right, and how that went to market. So just a couple of quick examples.
Absolutely. So just quickly, we're about at time. So to summarize what we've learned thus far is that pretty important to connect your departments and find transparency between them. Walk through your own process. When you find hiccups, let others do it as well. I think we saw that in TVC's case study of how they kind of allowed others to come in as well as just did it internally through their own company and other groups that were internal. I think there's absolutely no one solution for all of these, and that's kind of what is so nice to be able to engage companies of this nature and to have the advice of people who've actually gone through it, done it themselves, hit the roadblocks. And I mean, the Technology and Venture Capitalization Group, you guys literally, again, have that list of people, how it went, and so you can learn so much from other people and just the experience of this group, whether it's them helping you get the product to market or just kind of leaning on some of the expertise and some of those conversations of guiding you where to go next. And then right people, right tools, right process. So I think we can really express that enough. But as you go to scale, I think those are the real roadblocks you're going to be running into. If you don't have it right at the very beginning at the first customer, you're probably not going to get it as you start to scale. And those weaknesses will only be revealed in greater detail as you get larger and larger.
Exacerbated, and it becomes a lot harder. So get it right first.
That's right.
Absolutely. Anything else to add before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think we just included a couple of resources if people want to click through to those, and we appreciate everyone that's tuned in throughout the series. And
one thing we will do is work with TVC to have this published on their site as well in a kind of webinar 4-part series specific page, and we'll do the same. That way you can not only have access to content on demand, but other resources that we've referenced throughout. And that way there's at least a page of when you need it and when you're at the right stage, you might be a little bit more interested in, how do you scale versus, acquiring the first customer versus more of nailing the product. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys very much. For those of you guys who still have a little bit of time, we do have a Q&A after this, so stick around. But for those of you who have to go, thanks again. As usual, you can find us on Twitter, the Fluid Webinar Series, or either of our groups at the handle as you see on your screen there. This has been a great 4-part series. I really want to thank you, Spencer Taylor, the University of Utah, and the Technology Technology Venture and Capitalization and Commercialization. I will get this. You'd think after 4 I would get
We
it.
might just change our name
to
make it easier
for me. Well, I mean, I'll just go with TBC. I don't know why I bother embarrassing myself the way I do, but I apologize for Technology Venture and Commercialization up here at the University of Utah. So thanks for hosting us and the great 4-part series, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So quickly, I'm going to, Phil, I don't know, do you have time still? So I'm going to move you over here, and then for those of you live on Facebook, I'm just going to put Phil in the screen because I know he's been off the whole time. I'll have you sit here, and I'll just moderate questions from my side.
Hi, Phil. It's nice to be in the hot city.
Oh, may have lost it.
Oh, is my phone dead?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Dang.
I was at 54% before I started.
There goes your hour. Okay, so we may have lost our Facebook group. I'll sit here and just moderate with a few questions real quick. And this is actually a really interesting question in the first customer to scale. Give this to Phil to start, but the rest of you guys, please feel free to join. But the question simply is, how important is customer retention?
It's interesting, and we preach this in Fluid too. It's something we're continually working on. But if you don't retain especially your initial customers, number one, you can't show the stickiness that you need, especially to investors. Number two, you're again reinvesting to go spend more dollars to go acquire more customers that you've lost. So you're just basically doing a replacement, especially when you're a software company. That the whole thing's about, how do you scale a user base? I would say the third is that from a reviews perspective, from friends telling friends. I mean, if you nail the customer retention speed, and even if your software isn't perfect or your product at that moment, I think over communicating, being honest where you're at, and helping them see exactly where you're going, kind of that next product iteration roadmap, I think you'll not only retain, but actually create some really good advocacy. And so I think that retention piece not only is critical, for let's just keep the revenue we do have, but I think especially from a positive reviews and even future growth of word of mouth type opportunity.
If you were to give 2 or 3 suggestions on how to retain customers, what would your top 3 activities be that someone would need to do to retain a customer?
I mean, number one always has to be delivering on what you told them you could do at that moment. So don't oversell. Make sure that you at least meet or potentially exceed expectations. I think number 2 would be communicate. And that might be personally, with a phone call and a customer service individual, or even if you're small enough, a CEO, just getting some really direct feedback. And, number 3, I would think that when they, especially if you're a SaaS company, if you're billing them monthly or annually, and they see that zing on their credit card, if no one can answer what it is that, the value you're providing, I think you always have to not only showing the value they were initially sold on, but most of the time we expect in our world that there's always going to be upgrades. And we anticipate that we're going to directly benefit from that. So I just think that constant innovation and pushing the product forward to those next and later stages is almost expected now. And I think that helps from a customer retention standpoint, because they feel like this isn't just old antiquated technology I was sold 3 years ago, but they keep coming out with new things and I like it, and it's a better user interface. As much as we all hate Apple for coming out with new devices every year that we got to go spend money on, the operating system I don't have to spend more money on, and even iOS 10 or the new Apple Watch interface I appreciate, even though I'm spending money on the actual physical product. It's nice to see innovation and feel like, wow, that's nice, and it makes you a little bit relaxed as a user, and you want to stay around.
Cool. Fantastic. I think this next question I'll give to TVC Group. How much scaling do I need to plan for? When has my business reached it? I don't know if there's a right answer to that, but maybe speak from some of your experiences.
When has your business reached scale?
When have you arrived?
Yeah. I think that you have reached scale. You talked about being self-conscious or self-aware earlier, Phil. I think it's when you realize that you need to hire more. You need to, I don't know, you need to be doing more than you're doing now. I don't know if that answers the question or not.
I would say one indication of reaching scale is also being able to step out of the business and have it still run, because that means that you've got the people, the processes and the systems in place that will run on their own. And for me, that's one indication of scalability is if you can just let it run and it will grow, you've got the marketing decisions already, I know what I'm going to spend on my marketing. Like when you can stop making decisions that are imperative for your business to run, that's probably an indication that you have hit scale, because then either you're not, as the owner or the CEO, having to make those decisions, they're already in your process, your people, and your systems.
And kind of segue off of that, is that when you're starting to look to be acquired, or when does the acquisition conversation begin?
I think it depends on the type of business. I mean, and what your goals are, right? So maybe it is an exit, maybe it is a cash cow that you want to stay on board. So it might just be, when can I get an investment that I'm not per se selling off, but at least wanting some equity, take some chips off the table. I think from a acquisition perspective, there's some companies, for instance, this morning I was talking to Sorensen Capital, a company up in Idaho that was doing $1 million in EBITDA, and they just sold for $55 million, was what the owners made. And that was interesting because it was a strategic acquisition, and their technology was good enough that somebody much larger needed to suck them up quickly. And I think you see a lot of that in the Bay Area, where you'll have to spin off from companies that their path forward is to say, in 3 years I'm selling this to Google and I know what I'm going to make. And that sometimes is a business model, maybe not the right one every time, but I think it depends on the industry, it depends on who you see that acquisition path forward, which might just naturally fit, but it really depends on your business, I would say.
Yeah. I would say that acquisition question, you should start thinking about it when you or others start feeling the feeling of missing out. So when the acquisitionors, the buyers, start seeing so much value in your company, in your assets, in your resources, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be revenue, obviously. But if they can see that and say, oh, if I don't get that now, I'm going to be left behind. I think that's maybe where you can start saying that's kind of a goal if you're wanting to get acquired.
That's a great answer. Moving on just to the whole group, what if we grow too fast?
I think that's an important consideration. I mean, with companies, there's been some startups that I've approached that are kind of starting to get to that point. 6 months ago, I'm meeting with tomorrow. 6 months ago, we had a call with the CEO, and after about 30 minutes conversation, I said, you know what, why don't we just punt this conversation? Because, I mean, his discussions and frustrations were about scalability, and is my team ready, is the product ready, and I just can't keep up. And at that point, it's much better to first take care of your customers, retain them, do an excellent job with them, make sure your product's ready before you try to move forward too quickly. I wouldn't be over anxious. It's better to do it right than, have a sloppy reputation with a lot of people.
Couple last questions. Can I stop marketing for new customers once my business has reached a certain size? Will customers stay?
Well, did you mention that Domo has 70 people in their marketing department? I mean, why would you want to stop marketing? Even if you get to this viral, I think of Purple, like their ads are really neat, their videos are fantastic. I just don't ever see them stopping the marketing.
I would turn the question around and say, what are you currently buying in your life that hasn't been marketed to you recently? I mean, what are you buying that isn't getting marketed to you? Are there products? And then there might be one or two that you just keep buying even though they don't market, but I can't think of any.
Yeah.
But for you guys, I mean, it shifts. The tactics change.
I was going to say it's probably more about channel diversification and being able to look at new opportunities. So it's not we have to go spend more and more money on this digital or this particular channel, but it's more of the partnership. It's just distributor path. It's have we approached international, type opportunities. So I think it's probably more of a broader outlook.
And I'll actually weigh in on that. I think it comes back to return on ad spend. You will actually see a diminishing return on that, and so that's more of a channel consideration because, if you do think about it, there are, for many companies and most companies, there is a finite consumer, right? And especially in the case study that you guys provided with Untitled, they probably can only sell so many of those until they've sold to everybody in a way, and then maybe they need to sell a updated version of it or something. But at some point, it is truly possible that everybody could have that system, and so I think those are the considerations of, are you marketing, and then are you being iterative again to sell something new or provide new value of a different kind. And I think that's what you see even with toothpaste. Crest hasn't changed a whole lot, but they come out with a different color or a different tube size, or they find clever ways. Fast food is probably one of the greatest examples of that. And they just literally cycle through the same things they've been doing for 20 years, and they just remember. No,
the grip is not back.
So, yeah, the grip is back. So I think some good answers to that. And the last question is actually for the TVC group. As far as scale, what is the role of TVC as far as a consumer coming to you? Do you guys help with that, or do you exit at that point? Like, do you guys get involved with their marketing or helping them scale? What is TVC's role in the first customer to scale?
So we do, like you did with Pluralsight. We'll help help them put together the potential customer list and see if we can find contact information. But we're probably not in the scale phase.
Not a lot. We do try and help them get over the barriers that they have in terms of budget versus what they need to do. So we've got a marketing team in-house that is very selectively choosing projects that they can help put a website together for or put some collateral together for. But that's just because the company's at a stage where they need something to get to the next stage. So they need some collateral so that they can look good for an investor. Because it's tough to go to an investor and say, well, let me pull out my notebook here and show you how awesome we are. So we'll help as much as we can there, but that's one of the reasons that we've partnered with Fluid is we want to be able to hand the companies off to a good set of hands and a qualified set of hands to be able to say, look, you're kind of out of the nest, you need to go out on your own and start working with talented people that are vertical specific in their industry and they know how to market, they know how to put a campaign together, et cetera, because that's not our wheelhouse. So it's almost that stage of the CEO. We're in that same stage. We'll work with early stage, but then we want to push it out of the nest and say, here's some good resources.
Fantastic. Well, guys, I think that's all the time that we have. Thank you once again. We will be posting this recording to all of those who registered. You'll receive an email with the recording. It'll also go up on Fluid sites, and we'll have a page on the TVC website as well for you guys to get these resources. So thanks again, and everybody have a great day.